Let us pray. God, we ask your Spirit to be with us, to pry open our hearts and minds so we can receive what you have to give to us today. In these scriptures, songs we sing, words that are said, help us to know your need for who we are, your desire for who we can become. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Ooh, I forgot to do the thing. If you were cold before, you might be even colder now. So Barbara Brown Taylor is one of my favorite Christian authors. She's an Episcopal priest and professor at a small Christian college in the South. We'll be dealing with her book called Learning to Walk in the Dark for several weeks here. We started last Sunday. What I like about this book is that Barbara deals with both physical darkness and spiritual darkness. Darkness that's on the outside, darkness that's on the inside. She starts off chapter 3 by not being very kind to the church of her childhood. Basically describes how that Baptist church in Atlanta, Georgia, really messed her up when it came to darkness. She says, the preacher at that church taught me things about darkness I had never known. Without a single grinding of gears, she said, the preacher shifted the subject from physical darkness to spiritual darkness, using the history of one to fuel my fear of the other. He taught me it was no mistake that devil and darkness begin with the same letter, since they come from and are headed to the same place. Along with Satan and all his minions, he read scripture to support his points, picking up so many verses about outer darkness and the power of darkness and the people of darkness that bumps broke out on my arms and the back of my neck got sweaty. Before too many weeks had passed, she says, I asked to be baptized the way someone on fire asked to be hosed down. I wanted to be saved from the devouring power of darkness. I wanted Satan to know that I had gone over to the other side. The love of God had very little to do with it, though I spent a lot of time afterward trying to conjure the light of Christ inside me so I could fill the formerly dark cavern of sin that I was. Anybody grow up in a church like that? There are only about 100 references to darkness in the Bible. Darkness is the bad news. The verdict is unanimous. In the First Testament, light stands for life and darkness stands for death. When God is angry with people, they are plunged into darkness. Locusts darken the land. People grope in the dark without light, for the day of the Lord is darkness and not light. The Second Testament, light stands for knowledge, darkness for ignorance. If thine eye be evil, thy whole body will be full of darkness, Matthew says in the King James Version. When the true light comes into the world does not know him. Though he comes to those in darkness and the shadow of death, they love darkness more than light. On the day he dies, darkness descends on the land from noon until 3. He has come as light into the world, so everyone believes in him shall not remain in the darkness. But some people just cannot be helped. Yet even in the Bible, that's not the whole story about darkness. If anybody knows the story of Abraham, remembers the night God led him out to look at the stars. The old man was deep in doubt about whether God's promise of children would ever come true. He and his wife Sarah had been waiting so long with hope. It was a little more than a habit. All they knew was that God kept saying, it'll happen soon, but soon never came. So when God said it the next time, don't be afraid, Abram, I am your shield, your reward shall be very great. Abraham decided to point out the obvious. He said, hey, you've given me no offspring. Abraham said it bluntly. And so a slave born in my house is to be my heir. God didn't argue with him, but God told the old man to go outside and look up to the sky. Count the stars if you are able, God said to Abraham, for so shall your descendants be. It's not something that could have happened in the middle of the day. The night sky was a key player in Abraham's decision to trust God. Once you start noticing how many important things happen at night in the Bible, the list grows pretty fast. Jacob wrestles with an angel all night long, surviving the match with a limp, a blessing, and a new name. His son Joseph dreams such dreams at night that he catches the Pharaoh's attention, graduating from the dungeon to the palace to become the royal interpreter of dreams. The exodus from Egypt happens at night. God parts the Red Sea at night. Manna falls from the sky in the wilderness at night, and that's just the beginning. Barbara says, just remember that even when it's dark, even when it's so dark you can't see God, God can still see you. Verlyn Klinkenberg has written an article, talked about the end of night, why we need darkness. He's a regular contributor to the New York Times. The thesis of his article was that beauty is not the only thing that night has going for it. Essentially, darkness turns out to be essential for our physical well-being. We need not only plenty of darkness to sleep well, we also need darkness in order to be well. The circadian rhythm of waking and sleeping matches the natural cycle of day and night, which affects everything from our body chemistry to our relationships. And when we tinker with it, we tinker with the well-being of every creature whose pupils shrink when we turn on the lights. What then shall we make of the human determination to light the night, to shrink the amount of darkness in our lives and our world to the point that all creation suffers from our inventiveness, she says. Anybody who ever took a biology class knows that human beings are diurnal creatures with eyes adapted to light. When we go out at night, we need light to see. A lot of the creatures we glimpse in the beams of our headlights or flashlights are nocturnal creatures. Their eyes are adapted to darkness. They need very little light to see. For those reasons and more, it's we and not they who have bent the physical world to meet our particular needs. We're the ones who filled the night with light, so our eyes work no matter what time it is. The poet Yi Lung Yi says, all light is late. That reminds us how long it took starlight to reach my eyes. When I watch a star fall, I'm watching a funeral that took place a long, long time ago. Stars are light years away. Galaxies are 1,000,000 times that far away. Chet Ramo, who's to astronomy what Li Young Lee is to poetry, says that if I could find a quasar 3C273 in my backyard telescope, I'd be looking at a point of light that's starting headed my way 1.5 billion years ago. Compared to that, the sun is a newborn. Hundreds of thousands of stars flared up and burned out before the Milky Way delivered her first sun. So every time we turn on a light after dark, the receptors in our eyes and skin send messages to our adrenal, pituitary, and pineal glands to stop what they're doing and get ready for the new day. So when you open up that door to the refrigerator at 3 o'clock, your body says, it's time to get up. And everything starts working that way. Fluorescent lights and computer screens flicker on and off at about 60 to 120 cycles a second. That's enough to fool your brain into thinking the sun is coming up. Even the light from a cell phone charger or a glow-in-the-dark clock can cue your body that morning is underway. And when that happens, your adrenal gland starts pumping more adrenaline into your bloodstream to handle the stress of the day that's coming. This tells your pituitary gland to back off the human growth hormone your body uses to repair your muscles and bones at night. It signals your pineal gland to stop making melatonin, the hormone that regulates your sleep, that can only happen in the dark. Have you noticed that the section in the grocery store on sleep aids has gotten to be a whole aisle long? Turning on your bedside lamp may help you get safely to the bathroom and back, but it also upsets your chemistry. And the effects of chronic sleep deprivation include elevated blood pressure, blood glucose levels, depression of the immune system, increased risk of ulcers, heart disease, memory loss, and heightened appetite. Barbara says every nuclear accident in the world happened on the night shift. The Exxon Valdez spill in 1989, according to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, happened at night. Driver fatigue is responsible for 100,000 accidents, 1,500 deaths every year. One study found the medical interns working through the night were twice as likely to misread hospital tests, increasing the possibility of making poor decisions for their patients. The divorce rate of night workers is 10% higher than the national average. The risk of breast cancer rises 50 to 70% for women who work night shifts. So darkness is necessary for our health, and without enough of it, we make ourselves sick with light. Worse than that, we take all creation with us and make the whole planet pay for our fear of the night. Carl Jung says, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darkness of other people. According to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, version 4, sometimes called the Psychiatrist's Bible, DSM-4, patients grieving the death of a loved one are allowed 2 months for symptoms such as sadness, insomnia, and loss of appetite. If their grief goes on longer than that, they may be diagnosed with depression and treated with prescription drugs. Grief, perhaps the most inevitable of all human emotions, is seen as an illness if it goes on too long. One psychiatrist, his mother, a Holocaust survivor, had actually grieved for the first 10 years of her life after that happened. Was this too long of grief for genocide, she wondered? And the wondering led her to explore the idea that emotions such as grief, fear, and despair have gained a reputation as dark emotions, not because they're noxious or abnormal, but because our Western culture keeps them shuttered in the dark with other shameful things like personal bankruptcy or sexual deviance. She says, if you ever spent time in the company of the dark emotions, you too may have received subtle messages from friends and strangers alike that you're supposed to handle them and move on sooner instead of later. Some of us have even gotten the message that if we cannot do this on schedule, we may not have enough faith in God. If we had enough, we'd be able to banish the dark angels from their beds, replacing them with light angels of belief, trust, and praise. Barbara Brown Taylor calls this spiritual bypassing, using religion to dodge the dark emotions instead of letting it lead us to embrace those dark angels as the best, most demanding spiritual teachers we may ever know. Walking through the dark instead of avoiding it may actually lead to our health. One of the main things that tip people towards your garden variety depression, she says, is a low tolerance for sadness. It's the inability to bear dark emotions that causes many of our most significant problems. In other words, it's the tolerance and not the emotions themselves. When we cannot tolerate the dark, we try all kind of artificial lights, including but not limited to drugs, alcohol, shopping, shallow sex, hours in front of the television set, hooks to the computer. There are no dark emotions, she says, just unskillful ways of coping with emotions we cannot bear. The emotions themselves are conduits of pure energy that wants something from us, to wake us up, to tell us something we need to know, to break the ice around our hearts, to move us to act. So maybe we need to dwell in our own darkness and not be afraid. So Barbara Brown Taylor is trying to encourage us to not be afraid of the dark on the inside, on the outside, to actually risk walking in the darkness and let the darkness teach us something, to let the darkness lead us just as the light does. Because no matter where we step, she reminds us, we're not alone. And God is with us. And true healing happens when we don't turn on the lights. Amen.